Welcome to the Go Global Ed podcast, brought to you by the International and Foreign Language Education Team, also known as IFLE, in the Office of Post-Secondary Education at the U.S. Department of Education. Today on the podcast, we're speaking with Dr. Ida Rousseau Mukenge. This spring, Dr. Mukenge retired after a 50-year career at Morehouse College, where she was a sociology professor and served as the founding director of the Morehouse Research Institute, director of the NIMH Faculty Development Project in Mental Health Research, and chair of the W.E.B. Du Bois International House Living Learning Residence. Mukenge's scholarship is wide-ranging and reflects her passion for Africa, African heritage, and the social transformation, with more than a half-century of studying, working, and conducting research in Africa and about the African diaspora. Her research interests and capabilities are broad, ranging from relationships between work, identity, and mental health to church and society, women in leadership, and social justice. Throughout her career, Dr. Mukenge received 5 Fulbright Awards. With the support of the U.S. Department of Education's IFLE grant funding, she established Morehouse in Oaxaca and Morehouse in Bahia, 2 Fulbright-Hays programs for collegiate and K-12 educators in the humanities and social sciences. As we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Fulbright-Hays programs and International Education Week, we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Mukenge to the podcast to reflect on her long and impactful career, discuss important topics in international education, and to share insights into the Fulbright-Hays programs and how others might pursue these grants and fellowships. For the interview, we're also joined by Dr. Pamela and Ida, a senior program manager in the Fulbright-Hays division, who has worked on several IFLE grant and fellowship programs. During her career at IFLE, Dr. Maymer has had the privilege to work with Dr. Mukenge in various capacities, including as a Fulbright-Hays grant reviewer.
Thank you, Ida and Pamela, for joining us on the podcast. Pamela, I'm going to hand it over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks again for joining us on the podcast, Dr. Rousseau Mukenge.
Thank you for inviting me to share in this wonderful occasion.
So to start off, can you tell us a little bit about how you initially, given your background, became interested in language learning and in international research?
Well, it's a long story, but that's because I'm so old. Actually, my interest in languages started when I was in junior high school. In 7th grade, we had the opportunity. I was born in Texas, but I grew up in California. And in 7th grade, we had the opportunity to choose either French or Spanish to study. I chose French because I was always interested in what's different, and Spanish was all around me. So I chose French. I loved it. I went all the way through high school studying French, advanced classes and reading. And then when I went to college, I decided to major in French because I was still very much interested in communication and languages. And that was the beginning of my interest in languages. But I've also been interested in other people and other cultures. I went to a church growing up as a child where we had foreign students, mostly students from Africa and mostly students from Kenya and Ghana. And we were always introduced to them. I always wanted to ask them questions about home and what it was like in Africa, to try to allay some of the images that were presented on TV. So that added to my interest in the rest of the world, but particularly in Africa. Another experience I had when I was an undergrad in 1958, the first students from the Republic of Guinea came to Cal to study, and I was introduced to them, and it was just wonderful being able to speak French and being able to introduce them to my parents and to my friends. So all of that just sort of continued to encourage me to maintain my connection with languages as well as my connection with the rest of the world, but particularly Africa. And I think that's probably due to, I think it's maybe due to my mother's experience, but also probably due to my father's experience, who was very much what they used to call a race man. So he always instilled in us pride in race and knowing where you come from and knowing where you belong and knowing who you are. And I think that's why my interest in the rest of the world focused primarily on Africa and people of African descent. So that's sort of like the beginning, but it's a long story, as I said, because I'm
But it's so interesting because you were there for a lot of what has laid the foundation of the civil rights movement, and especially in I think taking on languages as your interest, you've been able to look at things from a global perspective during a time where many of us didn't have those opportunities to do that. So you're a real trailblazer in that area. And so I want to ask too, what kind of impact do you think because you were there for some of the beginnings of our international exchange programs, and programs like the Fulbright-Hays program, what kind of impact do you feel that had on your career, and how international education and the international programs impacted your scholarship?
Okay. That's it's interesting because I did not, when I was an undergraduate, I did not have an opportunity to study abroad.
Mm-hmm.
I was from a working class family, a scholarship student, had to go through and get through. But I'm also the Peace Corps generation. Didn't join the Peace Corps, but I did join a program called Teachers for West Africa. And I went to Sierra Leone, where I was the French mistress for forms 1 through 5, or 2 through 5, at Moyamba School for Girls. And it's there that I realized that language wasn't enough. The ability to communicate is not just about language, but it's also about culture. Right. And so I wanted to go back. I wanted to become involved in cultural exchanges of all sorts. But with French, at that time, they had only binational centers, and the only binational center was in Haiti, and they didn't need anybody. So somebody encouraged me to do the Foreign Service. So I came back, did the comparative education degree, and did a lateral entry into the Foreign Service, and that's where I became English teaching officer, assistant cultural attaché in the Congo. So, but I'm still not involved in Fulbright, and not involved in exchanges, involved in international work, international education, but not in making the kind of impact that Fulbright and Fulbright-Hays can make on education broadly. After I left the Foreign Service, I decided that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a representative of the U.S. abroad. I wanted to be involved in transforming Black education.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I went back to Berkeley to get a doctorate in sociology. And I was part of a cohort that decided that indeed we were going to transform Black education. And shortening it, that's why I ended up at Morehouse. And it's at Morehouse that I got my first introduction to the connections, the people connection that are part of Fulbright and study abroad, and all those things that I didn't do as an undergraduate. My first Fulbright was I came to Morehouse in 71. My first one was in 74, 75. And I just sort of fell in, I fell into it. I'm looking for something interesting. Mm-hmm. My dean said, I think her name was Linda Rhodes. Yeah, Linda Rhodes or Linda Rhodes, this a long time ago. She's coming to talk about the Fulbright program. Ida, go and talk to her.
Is that how it is?
I said, hey, I'm going to apply for this. So I applied for a Fulbright. I had the language. I had an idea. I was interested in political socialization. So that was my research project. I got the Fulbright to the Congo, which was Zaire. I think at that time it was called Zaire. So that was my first Fulbright in 74, 75. And by the way, that's also where I met my family that I currently have, my married family. My husband's from there. But there was something else about the Fulbright, the individual Fulbright. The Fulbright Scholar Program is good for self-development, for expanding your horizons, for fulfilling your research passion. But there's something missing in what you can share. And that's where the Fulbright-Hays Group Projects Abroad comes in. With that, I felt that I was able to share more of what I was experiencing with my colleagues and my students. And that's what inspired me to become involved in the Fulbright-Hays Group Projects Abroad. And then we did those two, still with the focus on Africa and the African diaspora. The one to Brazil, Morehouse in Bahia, that was the second one, and the one to Mexico, Morehouse in Oaxaca.
And so that kind of relationship with Morehouse has been, it really, your work in Morehouse has been so pivotal. And I understand your personal mission was take Morehouse to the world and bring the world to Morehouse. And it seems as though with your focus on improving Black education at Morehouse, you really had a chance to do that. And how did you act on that, your personal mission, and why do you feel that it's so important then and now?
Yeah, continues to be important. How did I act on it? I did everything I could to ensure that the full expanse of the world was visible to my colleagues, to share with my colleagues and with my students. So that meant that I had to be involved in promoting study abroad, welcoming international students and interacting with international students, encouraging my colleagues, my faculty colleagues, to become involved, to apply for education abroad grants or research grants abroad, to infuse into our curriculum aspects of the world, because everybody can't travel out. Then what can we do to assure that there is internationalization in the curriculum as well as the experiences on campus? And also I sponsored 3 Brazilian students. That's an interesting story. Just sort of happened. My husband and I became interested in Brazil through a program called Cycles. That was the Interinstitutional Consortium for African and Latin American research. And we decided not to do Africa, but to do Latin America. And the Latin American side happened to be Brazil, and that's where we became involved with Brazil, and it just led to this. But everything international I wanted to be involved in whatever ways I could expand the international experience at Morehouse, I did it. I encouraged our application for a Title VI grant, and we got it. I encouraged, as I said, both of those and took the lead on both of those Fulbright-Hays Group Projects Abroad that we directed. I promoted the teaching of languages, and I always call myself sort of an honorary member of the Department of Modern Foreign Languages because I've always had very close relationships with it. The immediate past chair of modern languages has been very instrumental in continuing what we've been doing, what we've been trying to do. When he was chair, he was responsible for bringing in the current chair of the department who introduced Portuguese. So now Morehouse teaches Portuguese along with French, Spanish, and German, and Chinese also. But I was so pleased to get a Portuguese instructor, and the Portuguese program that we do in collaboration with Spelman. But it seems like everything international, just about everything international, I've been involved in to lend whatever support and to encourage others to do the same. And I think with that, Morehouse has really become a world house. I can't take credit for all of it, but I can certainly take credit for the push and for doing, for putting my effort into ideas that others had. One of my colleagues in the department, young colleague that I was responsible for bringing in, so I can take credit for bringing her to Morehouse, started the Morehouse Pan-African Global Experience, and I did everything that I could to make sure that carried out, and she's expanded now to another institute. It's the International and Comparative Labor Studies Institute, so that all of that, I look at it and I see, well, it's happening and it continues to happen. And I hope that the ones who are there now will continue to take Morehouse to the world and bring the world to Morehouse.
That's fantastic. I mean, just the breadth and depth of what you've done, it's just so inspiring. And I wanted to ask you a question about so many of us who grew up in a low-income, first-generation, minority households had families who were very hesitant about encouraging the students to travel abroad. It wasn't something they were familiar with and had a lot of fear. And so what did you do, and how did you encourage the students and work with families to help their students kind of overcome that cultural barrier around traveling abroad?
Yeah, I can't say that I have really been involved in dealing with families, but I think that encouraging students to be curious, so that every class that I teach is not just U.S. based, but it's particularly with an African-centered approach, and an African-centered approach that identifies not only Africans in North America, in the North American diaspora, but Africans wherever we are in the world. And to encourage their curiosity, by giving them assignments to do this, do that, and do the other. So that we have only one anthropology course that we teach. We've been teaching it for a very long time. And in that course, I always give the students an assignment. You're a development anthropologist, and this is a problem. What would you do? How would you explain to a student who doesn't know anything about anthropology, if you had to preserve a cultural site somewhere in the world, what is the site and where would you preserve it? So that way they have to go and find out in order to do the assignment. So my approach is that if the students get excited enough about going abroad and about learning about other cultures, and they can if it's presented to them, and they will if it's presented to them. If they get excited enough, then their parents will do everything to be sure that they go. It's the same thing. You know, I told you that I sponsored 3 Brazilian students, and they were students from moderate income families. Actually, they were part of an institute, the CBICO Institute, that was started by some graduate students who just wanted to increase educational opportunities for Afro-Brazilian students. Well, when we interviewed those students who were going to participate, one of the fathers said, I mean, they wanted to go because they wanted to go to Morehouse so that they could study. And one of the fathers said, well, I'm going to do whatever I can to be sure that my son goes, that my son has this opportunity. So when the students are enthusiastic, then parents, particularly parents who have their sons and daughters too, their sons in college for the first time, they're going to do everything that they can and everything within their power. They make sacrifices. Mm-hmm. And those sacrifices are so that their kids can know the world and can know the best and can have opportunities that they didn't have.
And I think that's the key, is that for the different generations, and you've been able to travel to Africa and South America and other various countries. So what have you seen over the years? How has traveling abroad changed? And where do you think there are some areas that are unique, but also things are different from they were when you traveled or when your groups traveled?
First of all, it's easier.
Yeah.
It's cheaper.
Yeah.
More opportunities for cheap flights, and it's more convenient. And that's one of the things I've realized as an elder, that there are all kinds of supports just because you're old. So it's more convenient. And not necessarily an elder, but there are other kinds of disabilities, for lack of a better word, that make it easier for everybody to travel. And I'm thinking of air travel particularly. All kinds of and in every place that I've been, there's a responsiveness to those with special needs, various kinds of special needs. So I think that that opportunities have broadened and opportunities have reached everyone, and there's like a general kind of sensitivity to everyone. The other thing is that there are also different options for international travel. For example, I said that I didn't do study abroad, but now you don't have to take time out in order to have an abroad experience. You can do it in the summer. You can do it as part of an internship. There are also financial arrangements that you can get access to that would relieve the burden, the financial burden of parents. So I think that it's a lot easier, and you just have to go out and find it.
You know, for many students, they're not aware of the opportunities out there, particularly if you are low income or first generation or a minority student. You may not always be aware of the opportunities and the ease. I just had my nephew's girlfriend is doing her degree in Spain. And her undergraduate degree as a first-time student. And so I wouldn't have even thought that was possible, when I was her age. But I think, have you seen the number of minority students increase in study abroad? And what do you feel like are some of the barriers, but what are now some of maybe the encouragement to go abroad for minority students?
Well, the barriers were always financial and time on course. So that one of the things that it still costs a lot to go to college, and one of the things that students with limited means try to do is shorten the time that they have to spend in their curriculum. So the change for both of those is access to funds, and I think that at least I have seen my colleagues spend a lot of time finding external funds to support the college-sponsored study abroad programs. Also finding opportunities for students in programs that are sponsored by other institutions and other colleges that have financial assistance. But one of the things that Morehouse has been working hard to do is to design education abroad programs where students can use financial aid. And that means scheduling the programs so that they take place. We have what's it called, a J-Mester program. And the student travel abroad part is during the winter break, and then they come back and finish it on campus during spring semester. So that's one. And there's the other education abroad programs that we've had. I think we also did that for MPage, where students do the spring semester and then they finish the program abroad in Ghana. I think we did Ghana and Burkina Faso. So that's another way that students can use, because their tuition is paid with their financial aid. Their financial aid package covers the tuition, and they're not paying an extra tuition for a course that they do abroad. So they're thinking of very creative ways to allow students to integrate the abroad experience into their regular curriculum. And it also saves time. It keeps them from having to spend a year abroad. Junior year abroad meant that maybe you might have to spend another year or go to summer school. So that those creative kinds of ways to address opportunities, and particularly financial and time-wise, are allowing more students to study abroad.
So in your experiences, and we've been talking to different Fulbright-Hays awardees who are talking about their international and cultural experiences, and through your work at Morehouse and beyond, what have been some of the key themes in the realm of global learning that you think need more attention?
I think sustainability, certainly sustainability, and sustainability in the sense of development, and development that's not taking aid and then that's it. And then when you're gone, I mean, you go and you build a library or a school or something, and then when you go on, you still got to pay the teachers and the students have to have uniforms and all those things. So sustainability, and that is becoming involved in actions, civic engagement actions that will move whatever group you are involved with from where they are to where they want to be, toward where they want to be. And that's not like a one-shot deal where you get the opportunity for civic engagement abroad or for, what's it called, service learning abroad, but then you're the only one who benefits from it in the long run. So I think that conceptualizing and planning civic engagement projects abroad within the context of development goals is something that needs to go into planning education abroad. Another one is leadership, ethical leadership, to encourage students to examine leadership around the world, leadership policies and practices around the world, and to think critically about them within the context of the values and ethical principles that, I'm thinking more about Morehouse because Morehouse pushes that very much, being the alma mater of Martin Luther King. But to think about them in that context and to be able to think critically about them and to offer suggestions for how ethical leadership can be promoted and how one can become an ethical leader with a global perspective.
I think that's really important, especially in these day and times. So now we're going to get to a final couple of questions. And one is, looking back, what would you tell a young researcher like yourself about trying to encourage international education on their campus?
First of all, if you're not passionate about it, become passionate about it. Because when you're passionate, it becomes infectious. And always, everything you do, always consider that you're doing it within a world context, with a world's view. That's one. The other thing I would say is don't give up. You'll find some resistance, and the resistance, there'll be all kinds of resistance because there will be other priorities, but always keep your goals in front of you. Always keep, what is that? Oh yeah, always keep your eyes on the prize, and the prize is expanding international education. So those are two things I would say.
I would also say to a young researcher, look into the Department of Education's Fulbright-Hays programs and purpose programs. We have a lot of the programs that can help institutions internationalize their campus and bring a global perspective on their campus, from undergraduates to graduates to faculty and to the institutions. That's just a little plug for our programs. Yeah. But as you know, this is the last question. That 2021 marks the 60th anniversary of the Fulbright-Hays programs. So we're asking all of the podcast guests, what have your Fulbright-Hays experiences meant to you?
Well, those experiences have been life-changing. I can't imagine what these years on this planet would have been like without the opportunity that the Fulbright-Hays programs have provided me, and without the opportunity of knowing the others, serving as a reviewer. Mm-hmm. I got not only to know what I experienced as a Fulbright-Hays grantee, but also what all of the others have experienced, the young dissertation researchers. And a long time ago, there also used to be faculty researchers and the group projects abroad. So all of those, I can't imagine what life would have been like. I certainly know that there has been enrichment because of Fulbright-Hays that is awesome. I can't think of a better word. Awesome.
Oh, well, that is so encouraging. And you have been such an inspiration to me and our other fellow staff members and the thousands of lives that you touched. That little girl who wanted to do something different and study French has gone to leave such a big footprint, that those are shoes that will be impossible to fill. And we really appreciate everything that you have done in your career and for us, and moving the needle internationally so that Americans can understand what is going on abroad and bring that back to help those in our own country. So, you got any fun plans for retirement?
I'm waiting for this pandemic to disappear and for travel to be restored to normal, so I can finish. I didn't get to finish my Fulbright to Brazil. If it happens next year, I'll be able to do it. If not, I'm going to amass some of these frequent flyer miles that I haven't been able to use and travel. Get out of here.
You and me both. I'm going to have to hop on the plane with you. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you. You're an inspiration to us all. I think that's the best way to put it. You're just an inspiration to us all. And thank you for your leadership and the graciousness that you have shown us today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored.
As we are. Take care.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Go Global Ed podcast, a production of the International and Foreign Language Education Office at the U.S. Department of Education. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Go Global Ed and subscribe to our newsletter to learn more about upcoming podcast episodes and other IFLE updates.